Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 15th of June 2021. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators. In line with the Victorian Government current restrictions, the public gallery remains closed and the meeting is being held only virtually and being live streamed. So we welcome those of you watching this afternoon. Can I open by introducing my colleague administrators, those being Mr. Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And Mr. Cameron Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon.
And we're also joined by our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Glenn Patterson. And we have our Senior Executive Team, Ms. Jen Bednar, Director Business and Customer Transformation, Mr. Steve Coldham, Director Community Life, Mr. James Collins, Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Sheena Frost, Director Corporate Services, and we're assisted this afternoon by our AV technical staff, Simon and Jordan, and our governance team in Jacinta and Chanel. So thank them for being part of the meeting. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities, and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity of many cultures, faiths, languages and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community history. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Item 2 is the confirmation of minutes of the Council meeting held on the 8th of June 2021. Do I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes?
I'm happy to move those minutes, Chair.
Moved, Mr. Boardman. Seconder?
Second those.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have declared my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and do not have any conflicts to declare. Can I confirm that no administrators or officers have any declared conflicts this afternoon?
Chair, I have no conflicts to declare.
Thank you.
Chair, likewise, I've considered my positions and no conflicts to declare either.
Thank you. So I note there are no conflicts being declared this afternoon. I now move to item 4, public question time. There has been one public question received for this afternoon's council meeting, and that's from Mr. Rex Flannery. And the question is regarding the Harkaway Hills Kindergarten, and the question reads as follows. I would like to know how many submissions were lodged to council by the residents of Narre North against the building of a kindergarten in the Green Wedge on the same site as the Harkaway Hills Christian School on Beckett Road, Narre North, due to traffic congestion. I'm advised by the Manager Planning and Building that there were in fact 10 objections to planning application that was considered by Council's Planning Committee in 2015 on the 8th of December. And I can advise Mr. Flannery that attached to the minutes of today's meeting, there will be the reference page, which is number 54 of the minutes of that meeting, which will not highlight the personal detail of objectors, but locate them on a map showing the physical location of nearby objectors to the site that was subject of that planning application. We thank you for the question this afternoon. We'll now move on to item 5, officer reports, and there are 4 officer reports this afternoon and no closed council considerations. So item 5.1 is the Casey Growth Areas Contribution Plans, Priority List and Implementation Strategy Review 2021. and I invite a mover for that report.
Yes, Chair, I will move that report.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder.
Yeah, seconded, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, I invite you to speak to the item.
Thank you, Chair. Just some brief comments in moving this motion. Casey Council currently has 10 contribution plans that are on foot. They are set out in the papers for this council meeting tonight. What has occurred is that council has undertaken a review of its priority list and implementation strategy for these plans, and what is attached to the minutes is a list of those that review and the reviewed implementation strategy. Now, as I'm
Mr. Belmar, can I just ask you to pause there for a moment? I am having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I'm not sure if Mr. Boardman is having the same issue. Yes, it's just the sound's a bit bubbly. So perhaps I could just ask. That's clear now. So perhaps it was just an internet issue. So please continue.
It might have been. As I was introducing the motion, I'm just confirming that what is before council is the priority list and implementation strategy for council's current 10 contribution plans. It's fundamental and important in planning of new suburbs within Casey that reviews occur from time to time of what the strategies are and what the priorities are going to be for the use of the funds in the contribution plans. Tonight, what council is adopting is a plan that has reviewed those strategies and is letting the developer community know how council is intending to attack these plans into the future. The revised list, which is attached, has categorised the balance of projects to be delivered in these contribution plans. The three following categories have been identified. They are the projects committed underway, the high priority delivery, and the low priority delivery. It's important that the community understands that council is careful in the way that it uses the contribution funds and that it focuses on those areas that perhaps are growing faster than was initially anticipated, and that is one of the reasons why these reviews are important. And so with those comments and having carefully considered the PLIS attached, I move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to second the motion and echo Mr. Belmar's comments in relation to the extensive consideration and evaluation that the company listed in the proposed resolution has been undertaken. It is something that has been looked at from development rates over a 10-year period, completely consistent with our growth area infrastructure action plans, and it certainly aligns with the council's long-term financial plans, as there has to be consideration around a 10-year cash flow analysis to ensure that all of the individual projects that are listed within the priority listing plan itself are able to be funded either on a 100% project proportion or what's listed in the plan itself, to ensure that those phasings occur correctly and appropriately, and that the management of the plans itself are consistent with what the infrastructure that the plans ultimately will deliver is consistent to the areas which are beneficially receiving those projects. So there's a lot of work, it's a lot of strategy, a lot of analysis, and a significant amount of benefit to the community, one which justifies not just transparency as appropriate in this circumstance, but also insurance that the developed community's got confidence on how we are utilising those contributions and how they are being put to community benefits. So with those words, Chair, I echo the words of Mr. Belmar and second the recommendations put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.2 is the sale of Cranbourne Community Hospital site at 65 Barrick, Cranbourne Road, Cranbourne East. At item 5.2, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Boardman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the seconder is Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, I'd like you to speak to your motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. We note that there are only 4 council officer reports today. We note that this is the second of 3 council meetings we are holding in this month alone to do with consultations on our draft budget and corporate plans and other municipal documents. The reports obviously today, as the agenda entails, and on the 29th of June we will be formally considering the budget and the corporate plans based upon feedback from the community as part of the consultation process. This is a matter which we have held separate consultations with the community in person at Bunjil, noting that we are meeting remotely tonight. And I do thank again all of those individuals that took the time to consult with us to provide written feedback and written submissions to attend the community information sessions late last year, and those in particular who brought to our attention some of the very specific issues that confront the community with this site. And by making those opening remarks, Chair, I think it's important to reiterate what is actually being proposed on this site and the process leading up to the recommendation for us to sell the property located at 65 Barrick, Cranbourne Road, Cranbourne East to the Victorian Health Building Authority. It is a proponent-led proposal, the Cranbourne Community Hospital. It's important to note that a community hospital is not a 24/7 large-scale hospital. It is an integrated care facility to allow for more targeted, more responsive, more specialist care to the local community, and to release pressure from nearby hospitals, including the Casey Hospital and Frankston Hospital, and also to ensure there is that seamless follow-up and treatment support on those specialist care and social services to the community, which undoubtedly in our communities acknowledged as being something which is very much needed. It is also, as its facility entails, is to provide walk-in and after-hours care services and ancillary services, including pathology, medical imaging, and pharmacy services. So whilst it is titled as a community hospital, there are a range of facilities and services which the facility ultimately will provide to the community, all of which we acknowledge will undoubtedly be beneficial, that will address those very significant considerations around the current necessity, unfortunate as it is for members of the community to travel to neighbouring facilities, and therefore release capacity on those facilities. I don't think in the community consultative process we heard one objection against the merits of the proposal per se. What we did hear was size, traffic, accessibility, parking, noise, waste disposal and other issues, all of which we have certainly considered. But what we do need to acknowledge as an organisation, and what hopefully will give the community confidence that we have considered these issues quite thoughtfully and vigilantly, is that by going down a process where we have taken the lead to engage with the VHBA personally, and that's been done at the senior council officer level, that we have delivered a much better result for the local community and the municipality as a whole. Our advocacy efforts not just have resulted in the addition of additional roads and has certainly influenced the design principles associated with the facilities, but we have been able to look at what the future investment plans needed for that site, particularly as it relates to existing community facilities, so that we are not causing disruption. We are ensuring that there is a continuity of the provision of those services, and arguably they will result in better facilities as a whole in the future. And that has been the way that we as administrators have embarked upon this very important decision, is to ensure that we have worked with the state government, particularly the VHBA, to effect a better outcome for Casey as a whole. And I think we've done that. So it is with those words that I do support the recommendation to sell the site to the VHBA. The valuation process that we have undertaken has been extensive, independent, and very detailed, and for various confidentiality reasons that will not be disclosed tonight. But it does allow us to take those proceeds and to further invest in additional capital and community facilities in the municipality. So there is a windfall gain to the organisation by going down this pathway. So whilst there are still legitimate concerns from some members of the community around traffic and accessibility and the other issues I've mentioned, there is no doubt that our role as a very significant partner to continue to affect better outcomes will continue, and that certainly with the establishment of the dedicated community consultative committee, that'll have a very broad and wide arching membership, will undoubtedly put greater consideration of those issues and affect hopefully better outcomes as I've articulated. I do want to acknowledge the advocacy efforts of the local member for Cranbourne, Pauline Richard, who was engaged with all of us very professionally, diligently and considerately, and this is a project which she has been advocating within her government to effect and understands the community benefits that that will bring, and certainly Ms Richards' involvement with us has been very positive, and she has taken back the feedback that we have provided to her, and she certainly has relayed that to her ministerial colleagues and also to the VHBA itself. So I do support the recommendation that council officers are proposing tonight. We do need to finalise the negotiations. There are time commitments with not just the sale, but also the construction and ultimately completion and implementation of the facility itself. There is no doubt in my mind, after thoroughly evaluating community concerns, the feedback from the consultation over a number of months now, and all of the other available data and evidence, that the total sum of the benefit that this facility will bring to the community far outweighs any of the implications that may be suggested insofar as traffic and other aspects. I have personally visited the site a number of times, driven past it, inspected it as part of our activities here as administrators. And whilst I certainly think that, yes, there are undoubtedly further traffic and engineering and design issues that need to be addressed, I'm confident the process that we will be affecting and continuing to be a key component of in the future will allow that to actually occur. So with those remarks, Chair, I do support the recommendation as put, and I'm sure that my colleague Mr Bell will make some further comments in relation to some specific issues and the community consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In seconding this motion, I am mindful of the fact that town planning is essentially an exercise in attempting to reach a acceptable outcome when there are competing considerations. And this is precisely one of those occasions where there are competing considerations. There's no doubt about that. And what I want to do this evening is talk about two of those. One of the competing considerations is the ongoing role of the Bella Bella Community Centre, which is an important facility that currently occupies the site. And I am comfortable and satisfied from responses that have been made to Council by the VHBA that the Bella Bella Community Centre will be retained on the site for 10 years as part of the development. That will ensure that the Bella Bella Community Centre remains in a place that's known to the community and will continue to provide important community services, and that they will be able to continue to proceed even with the sale of the land. And Council has agreed, so both the VHBA and Council have agreed that Council will lease back the Bella Bella Community Centre, as I've said, and it will continue at that site. The Bella Bella Community Centre has been briefed throughout the land sale process, and the VHBA will continue to work closely with them and with Council to ensure that the services that it offers will continue. I'm also mindful that during the process of community consultation, we had a presentation from Bella, and I am very mindful in my decision making that they will be able to continue on the site for a significant period of time. The other issue that I want to address tonight is the issue of traffic and parking, and really these are in many ways intertwined. Firstly, I want to confirm that there is a letter contained within the council papers tonight, dated the 18th of May 2021, in which the BHBA has made a number of commitments and representations with respect to each of these issues. And firstly, with respect to the question of parking, the BHBA have committed to managing parking and traffic as detailed in their letter to council. BHBA are providing over 300 car parking spaces for patients, staff and visitors to cater for the demand generated by the hospital. Council is continuing to advocate to ensure parking is unpaid. However, it will be up to the operator of the hospital, Monash Health, to decide whether to implement paid parking. Regardless, council officers have undertaken a car parking management study for the wider precinct, which will help to ensure sufficient accessible parking will be available to patrons of council facilities. Secondly, with relation to the issue of traffic, with regards to traffic management within the precinct, BHBA will partially deliver two key roads, Western Road and Silk Lane, in the KC complex as part of the development of the hospital. These roads form part of the future transport network set out in Council's urban design framework. It will provide access to the hospital once operational and connect the rest of the KC complex in the future. For the benefit of the wider local area, Council has supported BHBA's advocacy to major road projects Victoria for access to the hospital to be incorporated into the planned upgrade of the Barrick Cranbourne Road. Council will continue to support this proposal and work with the BHBA and major road projects to ensure that appropriate transport access to the hospital is in place and the impact to the surrounding road network is minimised. The Department of Transport's upgrade to the Barrick Cranbourne Road as part of the wider Narre Warren Cranbourne Road upgrade project will see the delivery of extra lanes on both sides, subsequently easing congestion and improving traffic flow in the area. This will mean the impact of the hospital traffic on the surrounding roads will be managed and has been considered as part of the planning for the roadworks and the road network. And I am satisfied that the very important technical work has been done to arrive at these solutions. These solutions are not easily arrived at. They are thought out by traffic engineers carefully, and I am confident that the solutions that are proposed are ones that will be able to meet the demands. Further, BHBA's letter also confirms their intention to enter into a Section 173 agreement with Council, which will enable Council to ensure the delivery of infrastructure and roads, enabling positive long-term outcomes for the community from the site development. Now, Section 173 agreement, very briefly, is a enforceable legal document. It means that Council is entering into an enforceable contract with the BHBA in relation to commitments that are being made with relation to the improvement of the road network. And so for those reasons, and considering the fact that we all want the hospital to work, and acknowledging that there is a balancing exercise in, on the one hand, the road network, and secondly, the need for the hospital. On this occasion, I come out in favour of the hospital, acknowledging the impact it will have, but also mindful that important road network improvements will be made to ensure that the road network will be able to work efficiently. And with those comments, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'd like to add some of my own comments as well. Thank you, Mr. Boardman and Mr. Belmar, for that very comprehensive appraisal. I do support the comments that you've made. I think this has been an exacting process that Council has gone through. I particularly want to acknowledge and thank the leadership of the officers in representing the concerns that we raised on behalf of the community that have been extensively debated and discussed and resolved through with the VHBA. I'd like to also thank Mr. Fisk, the Chief Executive Officer of that authority, for the highly responsive manner in which the authority has responded to those concerns. And I think given great credit to the community for raising their concerns, and they have been most seriously dealt with and represented by Council and acknowledged and responded to by the authority. So I'm appreciative of that. I think, you know, this is going to be a very important community asset and one that's going to bring health services to the local area, for which I am very confident many residents will be most appreciative when they require and need those services. So we, as you did, Mr. Boardman, I do want to acknowledge the advocacy of our local state member, Ms. Pauline Richards, the member for Cranbourne. She has really been forthright in trying to prioritise the allocation of resources, significant resources, for a community hospital in this local area. And I'm confident that the services will be responsive to the needs of this local community in the longer term. So I too support this recommendation for the sale of land, and I put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Now move to item 5.3, and that's the lease of land at Casey Fields Boulevard, Cranbourne East. It's telecommunications lease. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, I invite you to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. This motion returns to Council following a period on public consultation. In moving this motion, I'm mindful that it's located at Casey Fields, which is, like all areas of Casey, a fast-growing area that it has significant part of the population use it on a weekly basis. It's important that opportunities to locate telecommunications infrastructure in these sorts of locations are taken up, and I note that it is a long-term lease for 20 years with a rental payment to Council, which will be indexed annually. And with those brief comments, I commend the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
There's not much I can add. It's a very straightforward recommendation, so I endorse what Mr. Belmar has said.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. We now move to the final item for consideration this afternoon, and that's item 5.4 on the agenda, which is debt management sundry debtors. And we have a recommendation. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move that, Chair.
Moved Mr. Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
Chair, if I can make some brief comments in relation to this policy and offer, by way of explanation, a distinguishment between the language that is in the policy around sundry debtors and debts as themselves. We are dealing in this policy of how we as an organisation manage debts outside of rate debts. So any astute members of the community that's read the council paper and looks at debts in excess of $30 million is probably at this stage thinking there is some significant financial considerations that need to be further discussed. That is not the case. These are very separate matters. This is dealing with when either a contractor or a party to an arrangement with council outside of any rate revenue type of issues is defaulting on their payments and obligations to us and how we manage that. So this policy gives clarity, confirmation and consistency to all parties in which we engage with for the provision of council services on how we would recover any monies owing in circumstances where there are default. So this allows us to administer the practice of raising invoicing and following up on those amounts. It's done so, as I said, with a clear expectation that our debtors are treated respectfully and with compassion. We're not anticipating, and certainly not the intent of the organisation, that there are an extensive number of those. And as we have articulated in the report, the total amount to be written off this year is only $58,000, which is inconsequential to the overall financial position of the organisation, and we are writing those debts off based upon our assessment that due process and certainly compassion and respect has been followed in our consideration of trying to follow up on those matters, and certainly a reduction from 345,000, just over 345,000 from last year. The policy also sets out the limit and prescribed situation which debts owed to council will be written off, and as I've said, that has been followed. We're satisfied that's the case. It does reflect a renewed approach by council officers, and particularly in importing and managing, I should say, this important financial function. It is not in any way the intent of any party to default on obligations, but when such disputes do occur, there's got to be consistency and clarity and transparency around how those matters are dealt with, and this policy goes a long way to, as I said, providing confidence to all parties of subsequent processes. It also allows us as an organisation to reflect upon our position. It's a healthy annual assessment of what we do in those unfortunate circumstances, but we do want to have a guiding principle that we do have a non-rate debt policy, so we do have a sound response to these matters, and with that I do encourage all parties involved with council business to reflect upon all of our practices in this regard, particularly this policy, and with those comments there, I am supportive of the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also supportive of this motion. There are services council provides to the community where we issue invoices for payment. In these situations, it's important that the community can trust council officers and have confidence that debt management practices are appropriately governed. The report tonight provides confidence to me as an administrator that our policies are being followed, though there are limited situations where the need for debts to be written off have arisen. The debt management policy that we approved last year was updated in recognition of the need to improve this function. The report today indicates that these practices are reliable, that write-offs are limited and justified, and as Mr. Boardman has indicated, they are a small amount when you take into account the size of the business that a council transacts. And on that basis, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports for this afternoon. I move on to item 6, the consideration of reports of committees. And I simply note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Move to item 7, petitions. And there are 2 petitions received for this council meeting. I think only one of those is attached to the public agenda. The second was received a bit later. It's item 7.1, Playground and Park, Orleana Way, Clyde North, which is signed by 79 signatories. And there's a further petition received more recently, which is the High Street Service Road between Peel Street and Kirkham Reserve, Barrick, submitted and signed by 12 residents and stakeholders. So could I have a mover to receive and note the petitions and refer them to the appropriate council officer for response?
Yes, Chair, I move that the petitions be received.
Thank
you, Mr. Belmar, and seconded, Mr. Boardman.
Second, and note that we have received the details of those petitions in our council papers.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 8 is urgent business, which there is none. Item 9 is closed council matters, of which there are none. And so that leaves me one further item, and that's to declare the meeting closed for today and thank those of you that have been watching live stream. Good afternoon.